Let's take a look at list comprehensions. List comprehensions is a fairly unique thing to Python. It might exist in other languages, but it is not super popular in other languages. In Python, we use these quite a bit. Now they look a little bit weird, but behind the scenes, a list comprehension is really just a for loop wrapped up into one line of code. That's all it is. So let's do an example for loop, and then I'll show you how we can turn this into something a little easier to work with. So let's say we have a variable called course Python for everybody. We could then have a list called myList, and that's just an empty list. And then we can loop through every letter in course, and we could say myList.append the letter. And we can print out myList at the end, which is just going to be every single letter one by one in a list. Just like that. Now there's actually an easier way to do this. We can create a variable called myList, and it's a list comprehension. So we're basically going to take these lines here, actually just these lines here, lines 2, 3, 4, and we're going to put them into one single line of code. And so it starts off with myList is equal to, and then it's going to be an actual list. It's called a list comprehension because it always returns a list. Then we can write the loop in here. So we can say for letter in course. And because every single loop iteration is going to have this variable called letter, at the very beginning, this is where it gets a little unintuitive, but at the very beginning, we can just return that letter. So we're going to say return letter for every letter in course. And let's go ahead and rename this to list 2, just so we know that it's not going to conflict or be confused with list 1. My list 2 gives us the exact same thing. And in fact, the reason that looks different is because that's the display method from our interactive shell in Jupyter Notebook versus what print is going to give us. Print list 2. There we go. That looks the exact same. And so really, again, all we did was we said, take this stuff and put it in here. Now we can also add if statements in here. So let's create a variable called vowels, and we're going to do a very similar list comprehension here. We're going to return every letter for letter in course, but now at the end we're going to say if the letter is in A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. And so if we break this down, you can really just start reading a list comprehension from the middle. For letter in course, okay, to the left of it is what it's going to return. To the right of it is going to be your if-else statements. So this is going to extract all of the vowels in here and put it into a variable called vowels. And let's run that, and we can see it comes in order. So Y, O, O, E, O, and Y. Now what we didn't consider was the capital E. So we could say if letter dot lower is equal, or not equal, but is in our string of A, E, I, O, U, or Y. Let's go ahead and rerun this. There we go. And that puts the uppercase E in there as well. Because it's returning just the regular E, not the lowercase one. We just checked to see if the lowercase one was inside of the lowercase sequence of values that we are allowing it to be in, but we're actually returning the original one here. So let's take a look at a slightly more complex list comprehension. Let's take a number and let's give it an exponent of 2. So let's say numbers is equal to, and we just want to create a for loop in here. So just start off by writing your regular for loop. For num in, and I'm going to use this new function called range, 0 and 9. Now we haven't seen this one yet in this course, but what this is going to do is, well, it's a Python function. So it's going to give us numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 9. And it just makes it an iterable so that we can use every single number in there. And every time it loops over that, it's going to say num is equal to 0, num is equal to 1, num is equal to 2, all the way up to num is equal to 9. Now to the left is what we want to return. This is what we want to get out of our for loop. So in this for loop, we could say num to the power of 2. And that's what the 2 asterisks means. Let's go ahead and run this. Numbers. So we have 0 to the power of 2, 0, 1 to the power of 2, 2 to the power of 2 is 4. 3 to the power of 2 is 9. All the way up to 8 is 64. So 8 to the power of 2, 8 times 8 is going to be 64. And we could make this bigger too. And these numbers get bigger. We could even do num to the power of num, which is going to give us some really big numbers here. Now that's all fun and everything, but honestly, these are not super useful. Well, the vowel extraction one is a little bit useful, but let's use an actual example here. So let's take Celsius and turn it into Fahrenheit. So let's do this the long way. We have Fahrenheit, which I am terrible at typing, so I'm just going to use the variable f. Fahrenheit is equal to an empty list. And Celsius, which I'm going to shortcut to C, is also going to be a list, but this is going to be a list of actual Celsius values. So a list of minus 40 Celsius, minus 20 Celsius, 0, let's do 10, 15, 25, 35, that's getting really hot, 50, that's really hot. And then we can say for temp in Celsius, print C. So let's just see what this is going to do. And that was actually wrong. That's going to print out the entire list every single time. Here we go. That's better. Minus 40, minus 20. And we want to do something with every single number in here. Every single temperature, we want to change this from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So what we would usually do is temp is equal to whatever the current temperature is times 1.8 plus 32. And let's just make sure these order of operations is working out properly. So this follows simple algebra, where we're doing mathematical operations inside of our brackets first. So this is going to take the temp and multiply it by 1.8, and then it's going to add 32. So let's go ahead and see what we have here. So minus 40 in Fahrenheit is in fact minus 40 in Celsius. That's the same. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 0 Celsius, this one here, is in fact 32 Fahrenheit. So this is correct. This math is actually working. But now if we wanted to put it into the Fahrenheit list, we'd have to do f.append temp. And then we can print f. Okay, so you know what? Honestly, this is not a lot of code, but this could be done in one line of code. Actually, 2 lines, because we're still going to need Celsius up here. So let's try this as a list comprehension. Let's set our Celsius, and then let's do this in a single line. So let's write this out as a for loop. So for temp in C, what do we want to do? We want to do temp times 1.8 plus 32. We want to make sure we have those brackets in there so that our math always works out. And then we can print f, and we'll get the exact same answers. So while this syntax, this formatting looks a little bit weird at first, especially because I'm using like f and c instead of proper variable names, this is actually a lot easier to understand once you're familiar with list comprehensions than taking a look at 5 lines of code. And here we've got 2 lines of code versus the entire 5 lines of code. And that is list comprehensions. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to write out a for loop the long way, like what I've done here and what I've done here. And I want you to compress that for loop into 1 line. So it looks something like this. You don't need the if statement in there. That's getting a little complex for right now. But if you just have the base in here, if you compress that for loop into 1 line, you are creating a list comprehension. Go ahead and give that a shot. And when you're ready, in your own time, we can head on over to that next video together.